So moving on to the semi-main event for the NJPW Strong Openweight title. It was a no rope last man standing match, and we have a new champion, the Madman, Gabe Kidd. He defeats Eddie Kingston to become the new Strong Openweight champion.
Yeah, I had some mixed feelings about this match overall. Like, this fulfills the obligatory plunder match quota that sort of exists on these big New Japan US shows. And on the one hand, I've been critical of that idea that like every US show needs to have plunder, even though I guess maybe in some regards, maybe that's part of the identity of New Japan of America. Maybe it is its own unique brand that's dissimilar from, New Japan proper. So, whatever. At the same time, a lot of those matches that had occurred previously that had utilized weapons and no DQ stipulations didn't have the heat that this match had. And this match like had built for a long time and really escalated to the point where a stipulation like this was needed. It kind of reminds me of how in the early days of ROH, they didn't do a lot of gimmick matches, but every now and again you'd get Raven and CM Punk in the cage, or you'd get
Mm,
a fight
uh,
without honor, like a
mhm.
Steve Carino match or against Homicide, and you're like, oh shit, like
Or like a ladder war of like the Briscoes and Steen and Generico.
correct, yeah. And so this, even though they do so many of these, this did kind of stand out as unique in the way that these guys worked it. Um, for a large majority of the match, I was really loving it because they bled, they hit hard, they used all the gimmicks, the crowd was into it. They were doing the little things in between, not just not just the plunder like the WWE thing where they're going around hitting each other and then just walk around looking for weapons. Like these guys were really showing a lot of hate, and almost to the point where, dare I say it, like it was a little bit Magnum Tully esque. Like I'm like, oh, these dudes fucking hate each other. Um, but the two things that started happening that I didn't like was it had that last man standing component. So every single time someone was on the ground, they had to get up by 10. The problem is they wanted to sell the effects of what the guys were doing to them, and the guys counting fast. So then, and they can't get up. So then they started resorting to stopping the count, and
Mhm.
there are many, like there were a lot of times that the match could have or should have been over, but these guys intervened, and maybe that, might be forgivable one or two times, but it was a lot of times where I was like, damn, like you guys aren't even fighting to win. And then there was a portion down the stretch where Gabe Kidd starts looking for a chair that had razor wire on it, and he couldn't find it, and he kept going around and around and around and around, and he's like getting pissed, and he's looking everywhere for it, and it was to a certain point like where he was just out there too long looking for it. I think he should have just moved on, and just audibled, because he wasn't able to find this weapon in a timely fashion. And Eddie Kingston's just having to sell forever and that sort of really brought a halt to the forward momentum that the match had, and it kind of stalled things for me a little bit. But they did pick things up eventually where Eddie pulls out the um what are they, the
Handcuffs.
handcuffs, and this is an ode to the famous match between Inoki and Masa Saito, where they were also in a no rope situation. We've actually reviewed that on the show in the past. But the finish of the match came where there was a table set up on the outside between the guardrail and the ring, and it wasn't on its legs. It was actually like stationed on those two things. And Gabe Kidd did like a maneuver where he basically gave him I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it was basically a brain buster to the outside. And it looked like Eddie's, with the momentum that they took, it was a really nasty bump, incredible visual, but it looked like Eddie just busted his fucking knee on the guardrail and he had a hard time getting up after that. And he didn't get up for 10, and Gabe got up, and that was the end of the match. And so I'm a little torn here because the parts that I liked, I really liked, but the parts that were detrimental to the match, like, were pretty detrimental.
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty much same feelings as you. I'm very I don't know how to rate this match because yeah, it was very violent, it was bloody, very hard hitting, and there was also it was hate feel like you mentioned. They did a great job building this matchup. You know, we were there at the press conference in Chicago and how it broke down there. Gabe did all these media appearances, building the matchup, and calling Eddie a fat New York slob and all this stuff. And like, there's a ton of heat, great build. But yeah, then there's just also a lot of violence for the match. But yeah, the whole like last man standing thing killed me. Everything counting to 10. I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like to me, that kind of like killed the flow of the match. It was like big spot count, big spot count, big. I'm like, okay, oh my, like it kind of chopped up the match a little bit too much. And then one thing we didn't really talk about, like the audio for this show was kind of hit or miss. Like at the very beginning, like the audio, like the announcers were really low, but they fixed it at the start of the beginning of the first match. But then this match, like the crowd was like kind of like the crowd mic was low, but it also seemed the crowd was like kind of quieter for this match. Also, like it didn't seem like they really were. I don't know if it was just the audio, but it didn't sound like they were as into it as they should have been. So that kind of hurt it for me as well. And then yeah, you mentioned Gabe, looking for the chair, and then the whole like stopping the referee thing. And I get it, it's pro wrestling, it's not like a real sport, but if you're trying to have some kind of realism, if you look at like, imagine if it's like a UFC fight, like could a fighter stop the referee from stopping the match or stopping a KO or submission or whatever? Like you can't tell the official to stop a call. Like you mentioned, there were several times where both men were clearly not going to get up, and I guess the whole thing is like, oh, they hate each other so much that they don't really care about winning right now. They just want to beat the other person up, which, all right, I guess I could kind of get. But at some point, like you're in a competition, even though it's a last man standing and you need to win. And so I think that was another part that hurt it for me too.
I would have been a bigger proponent of them, instead of stopping, like literally reaching out and stopping the ref, you just break the count by attacking the person.
Mhm.
That would stop the count. You don't need to audibly and verbally and physically like show like, stop, don't count him out. I'm gonna kill this motherfucker. Like you don't have to do all that. Like you just stomp him. Like
Yeah.
but yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I feel like they probably should have done some other kind of gimmick match, like a dog collar match or some other kind of violent matchup. Because I just feel like a lot of the elements of this last man standing match really just threw things off. Then you mentioned the nasty table spot at the end there, where Gabe gave us the suplex / brainbuster through the table, and Eddie's leg just crashed against that guardrail. And we've seen a lot of wrestlers who have gotten hurt off, Kyle Fletcher injured his ribs off guardrail. TK O'Ryan in Ring of Honor broke his ankle doing an Asai moonsault to the guardrail. So like those guardrails are very dangerous. So yeah, as soon as he hit that, I was like, oh man, like he immediately grabbed his knee. And I'm like, yeah, this guy he's gonna be hurt.
We have some questions regarding that. We'll talk about it here in a moment. One thing I wanted to throw out there before we jump to that. So I'm a big proponent personally of the philosophy that Bryan Danielson has when it comes to working a gimmick match with weapons. And one thing that maybe there are examples where he's done the opposite of this that I'm not aware of. I haven't like cataloged every action he's ever taken in a gimmick match, but I remember an interview where he was talking about, for him, he's like, I don't go into a match and when it's like a blood feud and I go searching for a weapon and then throw it in the ring or set up a table for future use. And he's like, and it's not to say that those things are wrong, but it doesn't organically fit the motivation of what I'm trying to do as a wrestler. He was like, I would rather find a weapon in the moment as I'm wrestling this person and then utilize it throughout the match. Instead of like having the foresight to like grab a trash can full of stuff and throw it all in the ring and like have this, he's like that doesn't really make sense. I would rather just find something and then in the like heat of the moment use it. And I think that that's, to me, I like that strategy. I think that that's much more like a Southern philosophy and just makes more sense logically from a like a psychology standpoint, as opposed like. And the reason I say is because like Gabe's looking for this weapon. It's like you can't find the fucking weapon. Just grab a different weapon. You don't need specifically. I get it. They gimmicked it up. They wanted to use it, and the reality is the only person that it really hurt was Gabe, because Gabe gave him a fucking pile driver on it, and the only part of the body that made contact with it is his own thighs, which
Yeah.
I guess is cool in a certain extent, because it's like, oh, he's sacrificing his body, but like it didn't do shit to Eddie at all, like physically. So
Yeah. Rainbow says Gabe berating a weatherman made him worthy of winning that title, in my opinion. So some questions here. Dr. Larry, it says, was Eddie bumping on the guardrail more of his impatience and sloppiness? Would Inoki's ghost spit at the ring and yell bullshit for the last man standing match?
I don't think so, but I mean, who knows? I don't think, to be honest, that wasn't his fault. If it was anybody's fault, it was Eddie Kingston's fault, because Eddie was the one who set the table up, and they were having issues with the guardrail, and he didn't want to push the guardrail back and just set the thing up on its legs. He actually pulled the guardrail closer to the ring and then set it up that way. So if anybody's at fault for sloppiness or whatever, it's probably Eddie.
Yeah, yeah, he was asking about Eddie. Yeah, if it was
No,
Eddie's
I'm sorry,
fault.
not. Oh, my bad. Yeah, it was his impatience and his sloppy. I'm sorry, I misread that. Yeah, it was Eddie's fault. Um, of course, I mean, you do have to ask yourself, watching that move, and think to yourself, what's the best case scenario here? And from a physics standpoint, like, where was his legs gonna go? Like, I guess the only thing I could think of is maybe they were supposed to take it at an angle and not go straight back. But I don't know, for them to do that high of an angle of a brainbuster, like, I don't know where his legs were gonna go. Like, they were gonna hit that rail. Like, that's just the way it is. Like, there's only so much space.
Yeah, definitely not a smart move there. And I know that there's a lot of people that, flagging the safety police and, why do people care about this? And like, here's the thing. I don't really try to be a safety police. Obviously these are grown men, they're wrestlers, they sign up to put their bodies in pain. Like it's their bodies, they can do whatever. However, I still think as podcasters, media, whatever, we can be critical and review the spot and say whether the spot was stupid or not. And I do think that the way he did it was stupid.
I'm a little bit like, I don't want to overcorrect on people, but there's like, oh, people will get upset and they're like, oh, there's safety police out there. They're trying to I don't know what the word is, but like basically anything that's perceived as dangerous, they come out in droves and shit talk on it and blah blah blah, right? And that's true. There are people that do that. There's a lot of fans, and ourselves included, who probably don't know all the inner workings of how and why they do what they do, right? And it is a risk that they're willing to accept as professionals and artists and everything like that. At the same time, this attitude that I hear from a lot of podcasters, people that I respect, that I'm friends with, that I like, that are just like, fuck it, it's not my body, I don't care. Whatever happens to them happens, Um, bro, we lived through Mizawa getting internally decapitated in the ring, you know?
Mhm.
Like, Takayama is never gonna walk again. We just saw what happened with Otani. He's probably not gonna walk again. For years, we criticized on the show. We were like, damn, the stuff Ibushi is doing is so crazy. And people are like, They can't talk about what he's doing. His neck is made out of steel, blah, blah, blah. And now his body is breaking down and he's not the same guy. He just literally can't fucking do it anymore. And I get the feeling that like I might be wrong here, but like Kenny Omega's probably not that far off from being in that exact same position because of the risks that he's taken. And we sit here and look at McFoley, bro. Like the guy can't fucking move.
Dude, he was trying to get cleared for one more match and he couldn't get cleared.
Right. And we're going to sit here and like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that like, obviously wrestling is dangerous. Anything they do could be dangerous. So I don't want to like, I'm not going to sit here and just like completely condemn the art because obviously it's all a risk. Yeah. Rambo Slam Pig is saying Naito too. Exactly. But at the end of the day, if you're a fan of these people and you want them to have like health and well-being later in life, I know they're not like your actual friends. You don't actually know them, but like, I just think it's such a shitty cavalier attitude people have where they're like, I'm a sicko. I don't give a fuck. Whatever they do, whatever happens, that's their body. It's for my entertainment. I put my money down. And it's like, bro, can there just be a fine line between like not having to police everything that everybody does and then also just not giving a fuck if these guys die in the ring or die later in life or literally like not like the fake like, oh, the Hell in a Cell, it shortens careers, but like they actually do stuff that actually shortens their real life. Like it's okay. Like, did they need to do this spot the way that they did it? Or would that match have been fine without it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what was going to be the best pay? Bro, watching it, I don't know what the best case scenario was going to be because I don't know how they would take that without his leg hitting that rail just based on the physics.
Yeah. I don't know, but yeah, he clutched it immediately right away. And there was a post-match angle, but he was down on the ground for so long and all the Academy young lions are attending to him and trying to, get him ready for this angle that's supposed to be happening. And like Jack Perry's music started playing for a long time and he's still on the floor. And then eventually he finally like got up and like crawled in the ring. And then Jack Perry came out and the Young Bucks came out making their New Japan return for the first time in 5 years. And also the Elite, they are feuding with Team AEW for Anarchy in the Arena. For Double or Nothing, it's going to be Young Bucks, Jack Perry, and Okada versus Bryan Danielson, Eddie Kingston, and FTR. So they came out here, beat down Eddie Kingston, and talked about living in Ontario was fine when they were poor, and just totally. They did. I was dying. Like they tore the crowd down, and they're kind of promo and they're still stomping. Like, of course, you're gonna get this work while we.
There were so many New Japan fans that were like deep in their feels about this and upset, and I loved it because it just reminded me of like attitude, not the shitty attitude era stuff, but like the kind of stuff when like Jerry Lawler showing up in the ECW arena, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
I love it. But going back to the point I was making, is the last thing I'll say is just like I think it's okay to just when people do stupid shit to be like, yeah, that was stupid. Yeah. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a safety police. Doesn't make you on the other side. Like it's okay to see something that was clearly dumb and physically dangerous and be like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got another question here.
It's from Rambo. We pretty much answered it. He said thoughts on the finish of Kidd and Kingston. As an untrained outsider, it looks like a scary and reckless bump to me, but then I realized there may be elements I'm missing. Thoughts on the safety police discourse around the spots like that. So we pretty much answered that.
But yeah, people were pissed about this. Here's one thing I do want to say though. And there's so much to get into when it comes to the Jack Perry and the showing of the video and the real glass and blah 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 blah. Like I'm not going to get into all that. We've talked about it in the past, but it's clear to me at this point, regardless of how long-term, how successful the push of him and aligning him with the Elite, how successful that will be long-term. It seems, at least in the short term, this has been mega successful. And some part of that success is due to the time that he has spent in New Japan. I'm not going to say all of the success is due to New Japan. Like, I'm not going to frame it that way because that's not the case. But clearly, this quasi, um, you know, excursion or learning trip has paid off. And whether it was creative or even just learned experience, it's been a benefit to him and a benefit to their company. When is AEW going to return that favor to New Japan?
Good question.
When does New Japan get to send one of their up and coming stars that needs the benefit of exposure and life experience? When do they get sent to the other company, and not just get sent, get major wins, get aligned with a major group, get serious TV time, and get pay-per-view matches? When is that happening?
Yeah, insert Lex Luger gif here. I don't know.
because that is probably something that needs to be happening, because it's all well and good. I don't get me wrong. I understand that there are benefits to Jack Perry. Obviously, he worked this show. He worked the show in Chicago. Those are both, I think that he as a name has benefited from the exposure. He's benefited New Japan's business to some degree as well. So it's not just fully one-sided, but clearly it's benefited AEW's business because they're getting him when it's all said and done. He's going back there and they're the ones who are reaping the reward from it. So when is this going to be reciprocated on the other side of things? And I think it needs to be. I think we're long overdue when it comes to this partnership for somebody to go on either a learning trip or an excursion to AEW and to be treated and booked seriously, for not for the benefit of their company, but for the benefit of their partner's company, the same way that they just did with Jungle Boy Jack Perry.
Yeah, absolutely agree. But yeah, in the post-match promo, Nick got on the mic and he said he loves the partnership with NJPW because it gives him the opportunity to beat Eddie in 2 promotions. And then he's like, yeah, the fans want to see us hit our finisher. They know what to say, and they pick him up, hit him with the EVP trigger, and that will build to anarchy in the arena. We'll see if Eddie's even going to be cleared for that matchup. He clutched his leg. I think he kind of hobbled to the back, but I'm sure his knee has to be very banged up after that table spot.